was thinking about what to do for this Pecos, and I've spent a good chunk of the last year and a half working fairly actively towards protecting what we've come to call the Greater Chaco landscape, or landscapes if we put the S on it. So I recruited my friends, Steve, Ruth, and Carrie, to also present on the work they've been doing. So let me just jump into this with you. As many of you know, increased oil and gas development associated with the Mancos Shale play in northwest New Mexico is threatening a large portion of the Greater Chaco landscape. Now, in intensive dialogue with the BLM, with archaeologists, with some oil and gas people, and different management folks, really hasn't produced a whole lot in the way of tangible change to the sort of standard Section 106, identify and avoid approach. BLM is currently in the process right now of amending their 2003 resource management plan. I think their latest estimate puts it sometime this winter, perhaps right after the first of the year. That's a little unclear. But anyway, so we jumped in with comments on their amendment, which they put it out as a draft, and a whole bunch of other folks did too. I think they got something like 25,000 comments or something. So, it's great that people are aware and they're interested in this issue, and we're getting it to the BLM. I think they got a little overwhelmed. But anyway, as part of that process, Archaeology Southwest decided to jump in. We partnered with a number of folks, but primarily with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the National Parks and Conservation Association, the Wilderness Society, and a group called the Western Energy Project, who funds a lot of these things, tries to keep it going. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about our efforts, what we've been doing, and sort of where things stand, at least as I understand it. Now, of course, this landscape includes the national park, which is fully protected. Nobody's drilling wells in Chaco, so that's not something we have to worry about. But there are many additional cultural resources, as folks know, in the surrounding landscape that are clearly affiliated with Chaco. Prime example, of course, the Great North Road going up to Pierre's, then halfway, and ultimately out to Twin Angels. The West Road as well is loaded with resources, and those two areas, I would pull those out not as the only areas of concern, but two that we think are particularly important and need protection. Now, over many years, the BLM has leased a good portion of this landscape, and really close to a lot of these important cultural sites for oil and gas, and really until recently it was mostly natural gas development. But the technology has come along to this point that they can directionally drill up to a couple of miles, and they're really tapping actively into this Mancos Shale formation, which occurs about 5,000 to 6,000 feet down. And they are doing fracking, hydraulic fracturing, so they're injecting water, they're injecting different chemicals, and they're basically fracturing the sandstone, straight at depth, releasing the oil and then pumping it out. And this is something that has happened really in different parts of the Southwest for a long time. It goes way back in southeast Utah to the late 80s. And of course, in the eastern part of the country, a whole lot of this is going on, but it's only in about the last 3 years that we've seen this really in our own backyard at Chaco. So anyway, that's a big part of the concern as well. One of the issues that we've got is BLM allowed these drilling companies to initiate this. They knew that their 2003 plan was not adequate, but instead of saying, we're going to wait and not let you develop these leases, even though you've already purchased them, until we finish the amendment, they went ahead and let the groups go forward. So at this point, the latest estimate I got is there's about 240 wells sunk into the Mancos Shale. Folks, that is not exploration. That's production of the field. And this has been one of the main rallying points that ourselves and a bunch of other groups have brought to the BLM and said, you've got this field in full production right now. They're estimating perhaps as many as 6,000 wells sunk into the Mancos Shale in the greater San Juan Basin. So obviously this is why we're concerned. The other concern that we've got is that BLM holds only about 19% of these lands, so the other 81% are held. Some Navajo Nation trusts, a lot of Navajo Nation individual allottees. There's some state of New Mexico lands, and there's a few parcels that are just straight private, non-Indian. But there hasn't been any real effort at this point to coordinate the different agencies and try and get folks on the same page. So BLM is doing this RFP amendment, but BIA is not engaged currently. The Navajo Nation is starting to get up to speed on some of this, but I feel like they've got some greater efforts to make. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is meeting with the different agencies and see if we can come up with a programmatic agreement, a PA, or at least some kind of memorandum of understanding or agreement among the different parties, and basically trying to get the other agencies to perhaps follow BLM's lead. Now, BLM says we've only got 20%, we'll do what we can do. So that's really the core of one of the issues that we're facing. The other thing that really hasn't happened much is outreach and consultation with Native groups. BLM has finally, in the last couple of months, added several of the Navajo Nation chapters out there as concerned parties on this agreement. But they haven't done the level of outreach and consultation that a number of the groups, including us, feel they should do. They really haven't engaged Pueblo people who have direct ties to many of these sites at any real level. So that's part of the other outreach effort that we've done. I went to the All Pueblo Governors Council meeting a couple of months ago, and actually last year, before we got involved, they had passed a resolution saying we want the Greater Chaco landscape protected. So I went back just to update them and try and coordinate with them. The other things I've been doing, taking a number of groups with tribal elders and cultural folks into Chaco, into the canyon, and then up to Pierre's, and getting those great views along the North Road, north and south, and really trying to have those folks understand, and they already do, but get a real direct connection for people to those landscapes. Because a lot of the folks that I took up there had never been there. They'd been to Chaco Canyon proper, but hadn't really been out to Pierre's. And at Pierre's, you really get a strong sense of what's happening in the landscape. There's no real recent efforts at oil and gas drilling right around Pierre's, but as you stand up on the mesa and you look south to Chaco, you've got a well pad that's almost due south, you've got one that's pretty much due west, and these are at a distance, not of miles, but several hundred meters. And it's just, I sat up there with folks and we tried to get real quiet, and the most persistent sound we got was the thumping of the well pad, just, not even a quarter mile away. Just this, anyway, the impacts are clear on many levels, visual, sound, and just this landscape essentially being dissected and chopped up. Now, we can't go back and rescue Pierre's. Those wells are about 20-ish years old, so they've been in for a while, and they're gas wells. It's not really that it matters much. So we don't have immediate leases around Pierre's that look like they're going to be developed, but there are other areas further south that are much closer to Chaco that are likely to come up again. Now, BLM has recently deferred a lot of those leases for at least a year. We're asking them for a permanent withdrawal of those. And they're now talking about a 10-mile buffer around the park, at least for the BLM lands, which would be great. The problem is, again, 80% of those lands are in other hands. So we're beginning the fairly monumental task of outreach with individual lottie owners, and that's a really complicated thing to negotiate. I have heard from the Navajo Nation that they're trying to bring an attorney on for the tribe and do some direct outreach and sort of counseling efforts with the people who hold individual allotments. Because for a lot of these folks, it's like a mini lottery. An oil and gas company shows up, they've got land that's good for leasing, either directionally or straight down. They literally get a suitcase full of cash. Here's $100,000. We're going to pump your well. We're going to have substantial surface damage, subsurface stuff. But these folks aren't in the position where they get a lot of economic development. So we've got a really complicated cultural situation where we're going in and saying to folks, you really shouldn't do this, but they have the right to do it. So just trying to convey for you sort of the complications there and the efforts. And there are Navajo folks and individuals on both sides of this issue. There's no clear-cut right, wrong, or anything else. So it's a fairly complicated cultural landscape, with the modern people and the ancient sites. Okay, so just a few more sort of facts and figures for you before I wrap up. So we're at about 90% of the lands right now in the Farmington Field Office area that have been leased for oil and gas. 90%, about 85%, based on estimates, are currently under production or have been. So, I feel in some ways like I wish I could go back about 10 years or at least 5 years and stop some of this, slow it down. Unfortunately, that's where we're at. Let's see. On the BIA side of it, they've also recently approved hundreds of oil and gas leases on different individual tribal allotments. And we're having a problem just getting a map from BIA that shows those leases. The BLM data is in it. It's in a series of shape files. We got good GIS on that. Some of my colleagues in our partnership were in Washington talking to the BIA director, Mike Black, last week, and basically said, we need data on where the wells are, the lands that you've leased, and they didn't get much cooperation at all. So this is another one of the challenges we're facing. I think BIA wants to do the right thing here, but So far, they're just not quite up to speed. So some of our efforts are going towards helping them get up to speed. Okay, so right now we've got about 24,000 active oil and gas wells in the Farmington field office area. Okay, that's northwest New Mexico. They're talking about adding about a quarter more of those over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. We've got about 15,000 miles of roads that are tied directly to those facilities. So, the impacts are there, and I've had some people say to me, well, the horses are long gone from your barn, but, that's true to some extent, but we've got a lot of places on the landscape that we could still get some additional protection for. So, I'm trying to round up those horses. Okay, so right now, again, the BLM is about 18 months into this plan, this amendment to their resource management plan. They are saying maybe late December, January, they're going to finish that. And we've got comments in, and all we can really do is wait and see. One of the things that we've pushed with the BLM is the idea of a master leasing plan. This is for all the lands in BLM that aren't leased, and we're hoping that perhaps we can get it retroactively applied to some of the leases that already are in place. That's a much trickier ground. But the basics of the MLP, or master leasing plan, is that oil companies have to commit and tell BLM what they're going to be doing in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, so that BLM and all the interested parties, people in the public, those of us who care about it, have a sense of where things are going to go with it. And it's not just that all of a sudden an oil and gas company is 7 years into a 10-year lease, they show up at the Farmington office and say, hey, we want to go drill. And they do all their environmental work. 3 months later, they're drilling, and no one has found out that they're doing that. So we're trying to make this process a lot more really open and transparent for the public. So, for all of us, we'll see how that goes.